Will it be a game changer or more of the same? Zimbabweans voted in the first election since Robert Mugabe's ouster from power. It's the first time in the country's history the 94-year-old's name isn't on the ballot. His successor, as well as the opposition candidate, needs the election to be free and fair to restore Zimbabwe's standing on the international stage. To discuss if this election will be a game changer for the country, I'm joined by Barnaby Fletcher, Senior Analyst, Southern Africa at Control Risks, who joins us from London. Good to have you on the program. As well as Farai Magubu, human rights activist and executive director at the Center for Natural Resource Governance, who joins us from Maturi. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on the program this evening. Could the last-minute plea, I want to start with you actually, Mr. Magubu, could the last-minute plea which we had from Robert Mugabe last night sway this vote? If you could hear me, Mr. Magubu, could the last-minute plea which we had from Robert Mugabe last night to vote for the opposition candidate potentially sway this vote? Mr. Fletcher, I'm going to have to throw that question to you. It seems we have some technical issues on the program.
No problem. I'm happy to share my thoughts while we get this sorted out. I think the statement from Mugabe that came yesterday, the statement said he was not going to vote for his own party, ZANU-PF, and he wasn't going to vote for his successor, Emmerson Mnangagwa. And then it seems that he voted, in fact, for the main opposition candidate, Nelson Chamisa. It's difficult to know exactly how this is going to play out. This statement wasn't necessarily a surprise. Chamisa, there had been rumors that he had been talking to Robert Mugabe, and in fact, Mnangagwa, the ZANU-PF candidate, came out and accused them of working together and striking a deal. Now, in some areas, in rural areas of Zimbabwe, where ZANU-PF has traditionally been popular, Mugabe still holds a lot of sway. There's a lot of people who still very much look to him as the Liberation War hero. And these voters could be swayed by Mugabe's statement. On the other hand, Chamisa is playing a pretty dangerous game here because a lot of natural opposition supporters, especially kind of young, educated people living in the urban areas in Harare and Bulawayo, will be very suspicious of any kind of suspicion that there could be a deal that could see Mugabe return to a position of political influence, and in particular, that could see his wife, Grace Mugabe, return into the political landscape.
Now let's talk about Emmerson Mnangagwa, because after all, he was an ally of Robert Mugabe. How much of a change is he really?
You're absolutely right. He is an ally of Mugabe. He was by Mugabe's side since before 1980, the end of white minority rule. And many people look at him and think, well, this is just same old, same old. But since coming to power in November, he has actually embarked on a really ambitious program of economic reform. Now, there are certain things that aren't changing. He doesn't seem to be cracking down on allegations of corruption. There are people within his cabinet who have been implicated in all sorts of scandals. He doesn't seem to be distancing ZANU-PF from the connections with the security forces that it has traditionally had. In fact, a number of security force figures are in his current cabinet. But he has recognized the need to make economic changes, and he has broad support for this. I mean, he came into power in November with military intervention to force Mugabe from office. And the military intervened because they recognized that the economic crisis was potentially threatening political stability. There were concerns about their ability to pay their soldiers. So there is a genuine effort and a genuine recognition of the need to improve the business environment, to attract foreign investment, and to generally open up the economy.
Okay, Mr. Fletcher, I'm going to have, I believe we do have Mr. Magubu on the line with us from Mutare. If you can hear me, sir, there are fears that the ruling ZANU-PF party would try and rig this election, but why would they when there's so much at stake?
Sorry, can you come again?
There are fears that the ruling party, the ZANU-PF, would try and rig this vote. But why would they when there is so much at stake?
Yeah, there are those fears, but mainly because of the historical facts that ZANU-PF has always manipulated state institutions to win elections. They've used the electoral body, they've used the Zimbabwe National Army, they've used the Zimbabwe Republic Police, and the entire public service, which is usually recruited through ZANU-PF structures. So in 2018, many people expected the movement for democratic change to win by a landslide, but the opposite happened. And until now, there has been no explanation as to the massive victory by ZANU-PF in 2018. So most of us who have been following these events and trying to analyze them, we are saying nothing has changed in terms of the electoral environment. It is still very much under the control of the military and ZANU-PF, and that's why there are these fears that there is much that we don't know about the running of this election.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you. So if this vote does go to a runoff, will the military accept it?
Yes, they will accept it because they are trying very much to convince the citizens, the region, and the international community that this is a new dispensation that is different from the Robert Mugabe era, where they accept the rule of law and they accept the outcome of the election. But before we even talk about the rule of law, we have to say, will this election actually reflect the will of the people? And that is the problem that we have, that we feel it seems there is much that we don't know about this election. For instance, the biometric voters roll, they refuse to disclose the voters roll with pictures. And many people feel that's where the manipulation is taking place.
Okay, I want to bring in Barnaby Fletcher back once again. Now, Nelson Chamisa, he says he wants to be the country's youngest leader, but does he have what it takes to fix Zimbabwe? When we talk about what needs fixing in the country, the economy, we need a basic currency for the country.
I think that's a very good question. That's one of the concerns that certainly people I've spoken to around Zimbabwe have expressed. There's a lot of excitement around Chamisa. He has run a very effective campaign. He has run a very positive campaign in terms of his messages. And frankly, the results, whichever way they go, are likely to be a lot closer than anyone expected 6 months ago. But one of the key concerns that people still have is around his experience. Last time the Movement for Democratic Change were not in power, but in the government of national unity, a coalition government after the 2008 elections, people looked at their performance in there and, with a few very notable exceptions, were not overly impressed. And I think there are a lot of people who would naturally be opposition voters, but they are looking at Mnangagwa, his reform program, and thinking, we may not necessarily like ZANU-PF's legacy, we may not necessarily like everything about Mnangagwa's cabinet and performance so far, but ZANU-PF do have experience in running a country, and at the moment, with the reforms, some people are thinking that's what's needed.
But to be fair, they haven't run the country very well over the past 40 years. That's why we're in the situation which we are in today.
That is a good point, but that doesn't detract from the fact that a lot of people that I've been speaking to have expressed concerns about Chamisa's experience. I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of questions about ZANU-PF's legacy, but Mnangagwa has come in with an ambitious economic reform program. As I said, a lot of other issues around opening up the political space are not yet dealt with, and he hasn't made significant moves to deal with them. But in terms of the economy, he's announced quite a number of kind of common sense reforms. He has spoken a lot about the investment that this has attracted. This has not yet trickled down to the lives of your ordinary Zimbabwean. But those kind of messages, his campaign of, I know how to do this, I think does cut through in some areas. Certainly not all areas, and certainly not with all voters.
Mr. Maguwu, I just want to ask you now, the International Monetary Fund, clearly Zimbabwe is in need of cash from the lender, but they're not going to accept what Zimbabwe has been doing up until now. That's printing amounts of cash. How can the country get in line quickly to access these funds?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get much of what you're saying. Can you come again?
Sure. I was saying that the International Monetary Fund needs fast reforms from Zimbabwe if they're going to start lending the country money. How are we going to get such quick reforms with either the opposition or with the ZANU-PF, which has not done much over the past few years?
Okay, I think it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy to get Zimbabwe to start moving forward again, mainly because it's a confidence issue. If ZANU-PF is to win this election, remember, Emerson Mnangagwa has been Mugabe's deputy since 2014. He has been in government since 1980, and much of the policies that Mugabe embarked on, Emerson Mnangagwa was part of it. So the issue of trust is still very key. How is he going to convince investors that their money will be safe in Zimbabwe? On the other side, Nelson Chamisa, it appears that though he has run a very brilliant campaign, it appears the Western world and the big powers have not really given him much benefit of doubt. It appears like he has not managed to convince them that he is the right candidate for Zimbabwe to take this country forward. So he has to start from nothing.
Okay, Mr. Maguwu, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut you off. We're completely out of time. That's it for this edition of the France 24 debate. I'd like to thank my guests, Bonby Fletcher from London and Farouk Maguwu, who joined me from Mature. And thank you for watching.